It's O. Henry's birthday. And today on Austin Faith Dialogue, you'll hear for the first time songs written by the great short story writer. Stay tuned for this very special edition.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and we welcome you today both for this program, and we invite you to the Central Presbyterian Church this afternoon for the O. Henry birthday, an annual celebration sponsored by the Friends of the O. Henry Museum. But what makes this year's celebration so special is that for the first time there will be a production of music and lyrics that O. Henry, William Sidney Porter, helped contribute to at the turn of the century. It so happened, too, that 100 years ago, in 1894, Will Porter in Austin, Texas, purchased and began publishing the Rolling Stone, not the rock and roll version of our era, but one that was very much fit for his time. And then by the 1909, he had helped write a Broadway musical, hopefully going to Broadway, called Lo. And what we have today is a combination of those creative efforts by William Sidney Porter, run through the mind and creative spirit of Ellsworth Shave, a local playwright who's joining us today to talk to us about how this started. Ellsworth, welcome.
Thank you, Rich. Nice to be here.
And tell us a little bit about the wedding of Rolling Stone and Lo around the turn of the century, and how we're happening to do it at the end of this century.
Well, what we've done is the Friends of O. Henry Museum, and I know that you were the kind of the lead on this, came to me and suggested that you'd like to bring some of this musical, Lo, and then call attention to the Rolling Stones, since it was the 100th anniversary of the publication of that here in this, would have been April, I guess. And so we decided we'd jump on it.
Now, let's take the Rolling Stone first. This was in the 1890s, and Porter was working here in various jobs.
Right. I think he was working at the First National Bank at the time that he was working on the Rolling Stone. He gathered together $250 from various relatives, and went and bought a newspaper called the Iconoclast, which may not have been fit to discuss on Austin Faith Dialogue.
I see.
And bought the rights to that and the printing equipment, and commenced to change the name to the Rolling Stone and started printing a newspaper. And from what I can gather, and the ones that remain at the Barker Center, which I've pored over and know fairly intimately now, at the turn of the century must have been hilarious. The people who at one time his subscription rate was up to 1,500 subscribers. And I think that people, when it came out on Saturday, were doubling up in laughter on the street corner, because there was some very funny stuff in it, and it was very appropriate for its time. We had to do some work to enhance it and bring it forward and make the comedy a little bit different, but we changed it very little.
Okay, and then by another decade had gone by, and he was in New York, and soon thereafter was working on this hoped-for Broadway musical. Where did the word Lo or title come from?
Well, Lo comes from, and I'm going to read this so I get it right. Lo it's L-O, and they claim it's the shortest musical comedy title in history ever to make it or not to Broadway. And it comes from the Alexander Pope couplet, "Lo, the poor Indian, whose untutored mind sees God in clouds or hears him on the wind, lo, the noble savage." Now, I don't, if you want to run with that as a Presbyterian minister, that I could just sit here and listen, or we could...
Well, Lo, I am about to introduce the first of these musical numbers that come from that. We're pleased to have folks who are going to be presenting this production this afternoon, and the first of the songs is Love Is All That Matters, and we're going to be hearing Denise Parker, Juan Sayas, Alan Lachey singing, accompanied by Gene Stillman. We look forward now to hearing that.
An audience is generally clamorous for Just let the theme and melody be amorous, and let the honeyed sentiment be plain. If the music's tuneful, if the words are spoonful, love is all you need in our refrain. For love is all that matters in a waltz refrain. A lilt that softly patters like a summer rain. A theme that's worn to tatters and an ancient strain. Yet love is all that matters in a waltz refrain. Now I might sing a song of high society, or I might sing about a lot of things. I might spend the time on warbling you a rhyme on anything from cabbages to kings. But though I have an infinite variety of themes that I might sing about to you, there is only one thing, though an overdone thing, love the olden theme that's always new. For love is all that matters in a waltz refrain. A lilt that softly patters like a summer rain. A theme that's worn to tatters and an ancient strain. Yet love is all that matters in a waltz refrain.
Well, love is all that matters. I could almost make a sermon title out of that, Ellsworth. And it sounds like G&S, Gilbert and Sullivan type music.
Well, it's very much appropriate to its time. The music was written by Sloan,
Alfred, something Sloan.
Something Sloan.
All right.
And Franklin P. Adams collaborated on the lyrics and in the script. The play is based on a short story by R. Henry called He Also Serves, which is set, for the most part, in the Yucatan in an Aztec temple. It's an Indian Native American from Oklahoma goes to Mexico to look for his ancestry.
All right. Now, I'm getting the sense that this is giving a new meaning to the word far-fetched. What's the connection with this, and how do you make the connection with the Rolling Stone?
Well, what we've done is we've just taken the music and we've been working on reconstructing the musical to some degree, but in the interest of time we decided just to take the music and put it here and there as we go through the Rolling Stone. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interspersed.
And isn't there maybe a Gilbert and Sullivan piece in there too, as I recall you're talking about that?
Our original idea was to put a Gilbert and Sullivan piece in because O'Henry and his wife Athol had been in the Gilbert and Sullivan Society and had performed, and we had a piece from HMS Pinafore. We removed that because we were doing a little bit different version than we started out to do. Well,
the title of your creation is what again?
Out for the Moss.
Okay, and where does that come from?
Well, that comes from the title of the newspaper. He had on the title page he had the Rolling Stone, and then wound in with a banner among those letters that said "Out for the Moss," mm-hmm. And it meant that this Rolling Stone was out to gather the moss, and the moss being anything that was political, satirical, things that would irritate people in Austin and make them laugh at the same time. He picked on everyone, and I think he did an excellent newspaper. It was very funny in many cases.
Could you give us some examples of those that he picked on and how he did it?
Well, one thing, he picked on the German community somewhat, and in the end they pretty much closed him down because they controlled most of the business. And he started off with a fairly innocent reference to Sangerfest, which was the spring version of Oktoberfest. And as I recall, the little story went something, he had a fictitious Houston correspondent who attended the Sangerfest and said the Sangerfest was wonderful. It began on Saturday, and if the beer holds out, it will continue on Sunday, and if the beer holds out, it will continue on Monday, and so on. And the German community got a little hot about that. And so then he wrote back, he chastised his fictitious Houston correspondent, who came back and wrote in German dialect that they knocked the walls off the opera house at their party, and then he went on to produce a cartoon of a rather large German band conductor, and did a poem about this particular local fellow who was beating the bars, so to speak, and not paying his bill at the
And there's where we
taverns.
get the O. Henry pun-off theme these days, I guess. We want to also look forward at this point to another one of the songs from this musical. It's going to be entitled Never Forget Your Parents.
A young man once was sitting within a swell cafe. The music it did play so sweet, the people were quite gay. But he alone was silent, a tear was in his eye. A waitress, she stepped up to him and asked him gently,
Why?
He turned to her in sorrow, and at first he spoke no words, but soon he spoke unto her, for she was an honest girl. He rose up from that table in that elegant cafe, and in a voice replete with tears, to her he then did say, Never forget your father, think all he done for you.
Do not desert your mother, dear, so loving, kind, and true.
Think of all they have gave you, do not cast it away. For if it had not been for them, we would not be here today.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. We're delighted to have with us singers today on presenting music from a production called Low that Ellsworth is the playwright that's helping produce that in 1994. Tell us about I think it was about 1909 that these songs were first presented. Have they been presented since?
We don't know. I believe they were, all that remained were the lyrics and the music. The actual book was not, we couldn't find. And so the play was A. Baldwin Sloan, whom I have now remembered his name, wrote the music. And Franklin P. Adams and O. Henry wrote the lyrics and the book and the script. And the play, I believe, was out on the road for, I think, 14 weeks, quite a while. It was out in the Midwest and did well at first, I think, in Detroit, and then finally folded up in St. Joseph, Missouri in 1909. And one thing, the focus of this show, or one thing you can say about it, is Low and Rolling Stone were both somewhat obscure. I mean, people know O. Henry away from Austin as a New York short story writer,
Right.
who happens to be from North Carolina. And so these are fairly obscure. However, these are very honest works of O. Henry. And these were things that O. Henry really threw himself into, because they were not so much for the money. They were, you know, this was part of his love of audience, which comes out so much in his work.
And you know, one of the things that I have to say in knowing something about his life here in Austin, that it had real tragedy connected to it, and that he was convicted on an embezzlement charge, served some time in the penitentiary, and about the same time he lost a child, and his wife died. I mean, all of this came together, and our local writer and professor of literature here, who is, by the way, I think a distant cousin of William Sidney Porter, has written a book called Time to Write, and indicating that somehow through all of this, his creative impulse emerged, and there was a faith component to this. And I'm wondering, do you see any evidence of how his spirit comes through these works?
Well, I think so. I didn't get. I stayed closer to the work than I did to the biography. I read everything I could find, of course, and found different opinions about O. Henry in different books. And so, you know, I in the end drew my own conclusions about certain parts of his life. The Austin years were difficult for him, but he began as an artist out in the, you know, when he first came to Texas and lived down in Cotulla, most of his work was devoted to drawing, and he did, and when he came here, he did some woodcuts, which have been lost, I believe. He was commissioned to do some woodcuts, and so and then the writing kind of came along with that. But in the beginning, the art was the lead thing. He, since you mentioned that, I guess it's no wonder he didn't come back and visit Austin after he became famous in New York, because he did have such a hard time here. And but yeah, I think that creative spirit, sometimes it's all that keeps you going. I think that you, I don't know if you're born to have that urge or not, but I think you do keep doing it. I know my experience has been that in times of despair or unemployment, that sort of thing, you have, wherever there was spare time in my life, and particularly when the television was broken, you know, I would write. O. Henry didn't have a television, and so he was a pharmacist, you know, at the prison there in Ohio, and so he, except for filling prescriptions, was pretty much left to his own. You know, he did. I don't think he went through all the different rigors that some of the other prisoners may have. He wasn't assigned to hard labor, and so he did have the time to write, as is appropriate for the title of the book.
Yeah. Well, I have I think an appropriate connection to make as you were talking, that his drawing was related to his work at the land office. I recall that was one of the jobs that he had, and that
which he liked very much. His favorite job, I think.
Yeah, and that this land office has been remodeled, is now the State Capitol Visitors Complex Center, and that it's going to be there on September the I believe it's the 17th, Saturday at 1 o'clock, that there will be more of the music to be, or at 2 o'clock, that will be produced, those that can't be at the birthday party on the 11th. Let's have one other song from this production. I understand it's entitled In Yucatan.
Mood amid the fruits and flowers, ladies in a land of plenty idly watch the ebbing hours.
In this paradise utopian, time and tide are cornucopian, so we say festina lente, all the sands of time are ours.
In Yucatan, land of eternal lotus dewing, in Yucatan, where sunny skies are blue as bluing. In Yucatan, oh land of honey, nothing doing, land of lyric love and leisure, place of poetry and pleasure, fairy land of nothing doing, Yucatan. Banish we the thoughts of sorrow in this country of the blessed, brood we not on a tomorrow. Life is only brief at best. In this land of summer season, reck we not of rhyme nor reason, as we puff the mild cigarro, singing life's a merry jest. In Yucatan, land of eternal lotus chewing. In Yucatan, where sunny skies are blue as bluing. In Yucatan, oh land of honey, nothing doing. Land of lyric love and leisure,
Place of poetry and pleasure.
very land of nothing doing. Yucatan.
In Yucatan, as the particular music that you told me before the show, Ellsworth, that you thought was one of the better ones of these
Well,
numbers.
one reason I like it is that they're letting me sing in it too, because it's the finale.
Aha. Okay, now, just give us a sense of what this production is going to be like on our birthday party here.
Well, first of all, I want everybody to come. It is free, and hopefully we'll have a packed house. It's an absolute comedy, hopefully a hoot. We've converted the puns and in order to make them presentable on stage into sort of vaudeville skits and routines. One very humorous thing to me is the history of Texas, and as delivered by Colonel Aristotle or Aristotle Jordan of the Plunksville Patriot, which was the small town newspaper that O. Henry invented to parody. And Colonel Jordan speaks much the way he sets types, upside down and a little odd.
Okay.
And then the music is interspersed, and the music is also choreographed, and looks very good so far.
And you're going to be doing a kind of Chautauqua type.
That's right. It'll be a Chautauqua style. I'm sort of the master of ceremonies, and
Sort of playing the part of O. Henry in terms of being the narrator.
well, sort of, yes, but not really.
Well, we'll just have to come and see.
That's right.
And then I think the other thing about this is that this is a first. This really is a creative effort for the Austin community, as I understand it. That never has the Rolling Stone, as William Sidney Porter was producing this 100 years ago, been featured in the community sense. And as far as we know, the musical itself that he worked on in New York hasn't been redone in any way. So both of those are surfacing for the first time, and putting them together is a real contribution to not only our community, but it could be of interest to folks beyond the Austin city limits.
Well, we hope that in the future we can. Our original plan was to have a full-length two-act musical. This show probably lasts about an hour, and we were going to, in the first act, do pretty much what we're doing on today, and then in the second act to recreate or reconstruct the musical in a little bit shortened form. And I hope that we can do that in the future.
So you have hopes of extending this and developing it in some way. Well, why do you want to develop it? I mean, as you've gotten into this, I sense that you've really found something
There's
here.
something of the challenge, I think, of since we know the story that it came from, we have the music. They did like it in Detroit, and so we might could do it in Detroit if it didn't fly here.
Okay, or St. Joseph, Missouri. You said.
Well, I didn't like it there.
Oh, they didn't
so we
like it
wouldn't go to St. Joe, no.
Okay, but just in terms of the fact that as you moved into this, I know you've written for the Live Oak Theater, the Texas Romance, and Calvin's Gardens, and so you've already on the local scene shown that where your interests lie dramatically, and sounds like this may be kind of a new possibility for you.
Well, O. Henry interests me because one thing that I cannot do to save my life is write a decent short story. So I've always admired O. Henry because he seems to be able to do that with some degree of frequency. And I enjoyed the research on it immensely. In fact, for me, it's hard to know when to stop researching and when to start, get to work. And it's sort of a challenge to reconstruct something and put it back together. And it's kind of an archaeological event and about an archaeological event, which the musical was.
So from your standpoint, dramatically, artistically, creatively is kind of like an archaeological.
Yeah, it's kind of a challenge of craft, I think.
Well, one of the other things, too, that I think viewers might be interested in is how in Jenny Lynn Porter's book, The Time to Write, that because O. Henry did have this space in his life that he began to be able to fill with his soul. And you were mentioning that in your own experience, there's something spiritual about that. And even though this is going to be a hoot, as you say, I think even in his satirical work, there's something spiritual. By the way, did he make any fun of clergy in this Rolling Stone that you know?
I didn't really come across anything. There was one, there was a column that appeared from time to time where His Majesty Speaks, or his Satanic Majesty Speaks, where he would give just out of the blue a list of kind of, I don't know, variations of the Ten Commandments, of things. He would say, these would be things that the devil wants you to do.
Oh, I see.
And so those would appear from time to time. I don't recall really seeing anything, and I was looking for particular things that would play on stage, and so if the story, or if an article was long, and it was not going where I needed it to go, then I would pretty much go on to the...
Well, it seems to me the religious field offers, you know, from this point of satire, along with politicians, clergy can be among the most pompous.
Absolutely.
And
well, one thing that
one very quick minute on this.
Okay, O. Henry was, you know, when we have spare time, we tend to want to do things, different priorities from what maybe we should do. And O. Henry's time in prison allowed him to not have to make money, because O. Henry was, in many cases, times in his life, preoccupied with making money, and that did give him a time to write. Okay,
well, we have to make best use of our time here as we're closing out this final minute, but we want to remind folks about the birthday party today at Central Presbyterian Church, 200 East 8th at 3 o'clock. And again, the following Saturday at 2 o'clock at the Capitol Complex Visitor Center. I think that we'll enjoy the creative work of Ellsworth Shave, whom we thank for being here as the playwright. And we would like again to thank our musicians, Denise Parker, Juan Sayas, Alan Lachey, and Gene Stillman, for bringing this music to us today. We'd like to thank you folks for joining us on Austin Faith Dialogue, and encourage you to be back next week. And peace be with you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.